Why do you write? Well, why do you read? The other day, and by the other day I mean a few months ago, I was thinking about the common issues that I observe in the work of new creative writers. And I started to notice that they mostly have one thing in common. So, armed with a hunch and a brand new batch of creative writing students, I confronted the class with these two questions, the questions I opened the video with, in order to test my hypothesis and set them off on the right foot. So today I thought we'd talk about these two questions and why I think they're such important questions for writers of all kinds, but especially for creative writers to answer. Like I mentioned, these two questions arose from patterns that I'd noticed in the work of newer writers. On the surface, these issues may all look like different issues. Things like stories that take place in intricately constructed worlds that have characters without character or actions without narrative purpose. Personal essays that read like faithful journalistic accounts of a particular day, or like college application essays, and poems that describe things in fairly familiar language and don't really do much else. And of course, I'll hasten to say that this isn't about passing judgment on new writers or their work. But of course, it is a teacher's job to observe the gap between where students are and where they can go, and then to help them make progress towards something better. In all of these cases, though, the shortcomings in the pieces are not something like a difference of aesthetic or just a misplaced paragraph or stanza. These are all issues of pieces falling short of what they're supposed to be doing. In other words, these issues are akin to building a toaster with impressive energy efficiency and unfailing Wi-Fi connectivity that can't actually toast bread. They are, then, issues that break pieces in fundamental ways. Surely, a story that doesn't tell a story is a problem. And of course, we're not talking about some ultra-artsy genre-bending work either. This isn't about the bold experiment in nonfiction that refuses all the discursive characteristics of the personal essay. It's about a personal essay that isn't very personal or, frankly, very essay, a product of a writer's unfamiliarity with the genre rather than their reinvention of it. So we have the work of newer writers falling short in really serious ways. But the good news is that these are also relatively simple problems to solve, and it all rests on the different ways that we might answer those two questions that we opened with. So why do you write? What motivates you to grab a pen or a keyboard and then start putting down words? Obviously, some people write because their teachers force them to, but that's not what we're talking about today. Maybe you write because it's an escape. You can go live in the world of your characters or the world of words or some other place. Maybe you get uncanny amounts of joy out of world building or magic systems or all those other things that fiction writers love doing. Maybe you write because you have strong political convictions and a message for the world, or because you need to negotiate a grade with that same teacher who forced you to write a thing that they think that you didn't write very well. Maybe you write for the joy of the sounds of language and the structures of sentences. Maybe you write because it's therapeutic. It's a way to process your thoughts and feelings. Now, these are all fine reasons to write, and I'm not here to say that writing for any of these reasons is wrong. But I've become increasingly convinced that only writing for these reasons can create serious issues, the kinds of issues that we've been talking about. At least that is, if your goal is to have people read your work and keep reading it. A while ago, we talked about how one of the most important developments in a writer's growth comes when they shift from writing what's known as writer-based prose, or poetry, to reader-based prose. That is, writers take a significant leap forward when they move past just writing for themselves to writing for actual readers. And the cold reality is that readers generally don't care whether what you wrote gave you a satisfying escape from a crummy day or scratched your itch for world building. Readers come to texts with different expectations from the ones that writers have, and overlooking readers' expectations is a good way to write something that your readers, in the end, might not care about. The good news, though, is that you don't need to become a mind reader or something like that. In fact, the best place to start understanding what will resonate with your readers is to think about what you look for when you read. Answering the question, why do you read, can actually be a great way to refine your priorities for writing. So, for example, when I asked my students why they read, they said a variety of things: to learn something new, to connect with characters, to see some aspect of the world in a new way. Tellingly, the list they generated for why they read ended up being fairly different from the lists they generated for why they write. And this, I think, is the key. You already know, at least in some form, what you care about as a reader, and that can be a great guide to what you should be doing as a writer. So, for as much fun as it is to talk shop and play with complex magic systems and work through the ins and outs of a fictional world's political history, is that really what draws you to your favorite works of fiction? Sure, maybe in some cases, and I think that those are the kinds of things that might sustain a community of fans, but for many readers, if not most readers, the intricacies of world building are much less important than having well-developed, interesting characters and a strong sense of narrative tension that leads to a meaningful resolution. That is, the distance between Mos Eisley and Mos Espa is much less important than Luke Skywalker's journey to fulfill his destiny. Without that meaningful human drama, there would be very little drawing an audience in to care enough about the story in the first place to even worry about the geography of a desert planet. But even then, there's something more fundamental that holds all of these different genres together. Something that can really draw readers in and then hold them. The more time I've spent reading great pieces of literature, responding to underdeveloped drafts, or listening to critics talk about one piece or another, the more I've recognized that audiences of all genres are really looking for fairly similar things. Readers of fiction want good stories, but those good stories are often measured by the quality of characters and the strength of the narrative that sees those characters facing real human challenges in compelling ways. Readers of essays want to see what Philip Lopate has called a mind at work, or a window into how another person processes some kind of idea, question, or experience. And readers of poetry want to see something about the world in a whole new way through the eyes of the poet. In every case, then, what readers are looking for and what satisfies them ultimately is a connection to the human on the other end of the work. I've often heard this described as a sense of human warmth. So the flaw in a story that just describes an interesting intergalactic civilization is that it's information without humanity. A reader might be intrigued by the world that writer has created, but there's nobody for the reader to connect to or to care about. An essay that only rehearses the chronological sequence of events on the day of a hike may leave a reader saying, wow, that's a crazy story, but without insight into the mind of the writer, without a sense of why that experience really mattered enough to be written about, that reader is unlikely to be moved. And a poem that calls readers to witness some dried seeds clinging to a branch because they're interesting will never have the impact of a poem that calls readers to understand those seeds as a metaphor for our frustrated dreams and unrealized potential. So our goal should be to consider what readers are looking for when they come to our work and then to deliver on that. If we recognize where our reasons for writing diverge from our reasons for reading, we can work to align our writing with our readers' expectations. And of course, that's not to say that we give up on the things that we like, far from it. This is a process of addition, not subtraction. For example, I'm the kind of reader who is totally delighted by the sounds of language. When I write a poem, I write with the ear probably more than anything else. And then when I read a poem, if it can sound so good that it makes me forget what it's all about, I'm having a good day. But as Robert Frost has written, no one but a humanist much cares how sound a poem is if it is only sound. That is, I'm not really a typical reader. A great-sounding poem may be enough to get me fired up, but most readers aren't humanities professors who spend most of their time thinking about the sounds of language. Even then, if a poem is only sound, if it's full of musical syllables but not much else, it will feel more like an exercise out of a textbook than like a meaningful poem. You know, the one at the end of chapter 14 that asks a student to write a sentence with alliteration. It's a trick, a demonstration of skill, and not really a connection with another human. So if your writing is motivated exclusively by your verve for the acoustic, you may earn the admiration of a few humanists, but you'll miss the broader audience you could have, the one that's craving a meaningful connection with another human being through the medium of literature. Of course, don't give up on sound, but make sure your work is more than just a textbook exercise in alliteration or world building or precise description. Those are all fun things that can reward returning readers and even delight your core audience, but they're probably not the things that will captivate them or hold their hearts. So please keep writing for the reasons that you write, but make sure to write for the reasons that your readers read as well. Where they're looking for the human warmth that sustains literature, don't keep them at arm's length with your own intellectual curiosities. A couple weeks ago, I subjected my creative writing class to a poem, a short story, and an essay written by our dearest robot friend, ChatGPT. As we read them and talked about them, those writers quickly pointed out that the AI was making the same fundamental mistake that so many inexperienced writers also make. There wasn't any human warmth. One of them begrudgingly acknowledged that a couple of the lines in the poem were taken alone, and I quote, bangers, but that the poem as a whole didn't really say anything meaningful. It was a stream of grammatically correct nonsense. The story did present a series of events, but the students complained that none of the action was meaningful because the protagonist was shallow and their actions didn't have any real consequences. Things just kind of happened and then somehow the story ended before you even knew it. There was no human journey from beginning to end, just some words in the rough shape of an uninspired and uninspiring story. And of course, the irony of asking an AI to write a personal essay was not lost on them. The essay was wholly impersonal and, in their words, totally uninteresting as a result. As we made a list of things that the AI wasn't doing but should have been, we were also compiling a list of priorities for their own revisions. And nearly spontaneously and unanimously, that room full of a couple dozen readers and writers all recognized that the most serious deficiency was the lack of human warmth. There wasn't anything to care about because there wasn't a human to connect to. But the point of all this is not that AI will only ever, at best, be able to simulate that human warmth. The point is that beginning writers often fall short of giving their readers access to that human warmth. They opt instead to write with an understandable but misguided sense that they should be doing something artsy and mysterious rather than something straightforwardly human. And I've shared this before, but I can't tell you the number of times that I've sat in my office across from a writer who was struggling with a poem or an essay, a writer who was facing the issue of having a basically lifeless piece in front of them. In every case, I've asked them a variation of this question. You could have written about anything, so of all the millions of poems that you could have written, why did you write this one? Why did you care enough about this thing to write this poem? Without fail, they respond with some unique, personal, specific, and compelling insight. They respond, in other words, with poetry. Poetry that didn't make it onto the page because they were overly preoccupied with secondary concerns, things like making it rhyme or making it profound. So maybe the real question is, why do you write? Or why do you really write? Of all the things that you could be writing about, why did you care enough about this thing to write about it? Let the reader see why it all matters to you, and they'll have a much easier time seeing why it should matter to them. With all the intricacies of writing craft and technique aside, the key to meaningful writing isn't all that mysterious. At a base level, readers just want to be let in, to be welcomed into a piece that reveals the unique ways that our shared humanity is refracted by the lens of your creative work, to be brought, ultimately, into reassuring contact with the human on the other side. And with that, my dear friends, thank you for spending some time with me. Take good care of yourselves until we meet again.